causing the stress, right? So for example, it's not the situation that we're in, but it's the actual thoughts that we have about situations. So it's the way that we interpret the world. So what we have inside each and every one of us, what we have inside of us is an internal, like a stress producer. Okay? And what that stress producer is our own interpretation of events. So for example, my model of the world, my experiences, my thoughts, my judgments, my fears, experiences that I've had in life, those are the things that are going to actually make up like this sort of filing cabinet of stuff. And then when future things happen, stress is going to just get triggered because of certain thoughts that get repeated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? So it's basically, we need to be aware of what our own thoughts are as individuals, right? So for example, I mean, any small event can even do this. Let me just give you an example. So imagine that you're about to call a relative, you know, you haven't spoken to them for a while, it could be a cousin, a sister, anybody, right? And you remember before you're calling them that, oh, you know, she was really annoyed the last time I called because I hadn't called her in a while, and she really sulked and we had an argument. So you think, the minute you're about to call her, you think, oh God, she's going to be annoyed again and she's going to sulk. Okay? So before you've made the phone call, you've had that thought. What's that going to do to your mood? You're going to be annoyed, right? Immediately you're going to be annoyed. You're going to be in a bad mood. Then you're going to pick up the phone and call, and guess what? Are you going to enjoy the conversation? No, right? Because you've already created that the event is going to go badly. You know, that she's going to sulk. So what have you done? Your stress maker, your internal stress maker created the stress, and then of course that manifested in the conversation, right? So it's very different from, you know, a physical threat. Like we are actually perceiving things all the time, right? Our perceptions of life are what make us happy, sad, relaxed, stressed. But what's really important here is to start building the awareness, right? Now, of course, it's unrealistic to think that we're never going to get stressed, right? Is it unrealistic? Mm-hmm. I would say it's unrealistic because, you know, A, we need it as well, and it's also really unrealistic. So it's unrealistic to expect that I'm never going to get hooked at or annoyed or, you know, upset when somebody says something, because that's unnatural. But if we can build a conscious awareness over time about the things that kind of get us in that stressful situation, then we can kind of do something for it. And so today I wanted to focus on some strategies that can help us to understand the way people do stress, so the way we actually do stress. There's a few mechanisms that are kind of general, so I'm going to go into those and explain those, and then I'm going to talk about some strategies that are going to help us to overcome that stress, right? So let's look at it. Let's look at the first way that we generally tend to do stress, okay? So most of us actually engage in time travel a lot. Anyone curious about what that is? Well, it's quite an interesting one, right? Imagine that something stressful happened at work yesterday or day before. Anybody had a stressful event? You don't have to say what it is. Maybe in the last week? Yeah, okay. So imagine, you know, you've had something stressful happen, and then you're sitting there in your mind going, what happened? Why did it happen? Why did he say this? Why did she do this? Why did she do this? Why did I do this? Anyone do that? Yeah. Okay, right? So what are we doing? When we're doing that, what are we doing? Yeah, and where is our mind? In the past, right? It's exactly in the past. So we're sitting there analyzing what I did, what I didn't do, why I did it, all of that stuff, right? And why do we generally do that? Because human beings, we have this need to figure things out, right? We have this need to get insight, to get information, to fix it. But can we go back and fix it? No, right? The situation stays where it stays, and often the insight doesn't really get the job done, does it? So what happens? We end up staying in a stress situation, and it keeps us stressed, right? So time travel, so we do a bit of the past, and then guess what? We do future time travel as well, right? We play the what if game. Who knows the what if game? The what if game. Okay, so I'm about to embark on something new. What will happen? What will people say? What's going to go wrong? What might go right? Anyone do this? Right? It's natural, right? It's our human instinct. But then what does that actually do for us? It actually gets us in a state where we can't be productive, right? And it's all this perceived threat that's going on in our mind. And we really can't change it either this way or that way, right? So what's one strategy that we can actually use to manage this is a strategy of mindfulness. We've heard the word mindfulness, right? Who hasn't heard the word mindfulness? It's quite a common expression now. It's been used a lot. But mindfulness essentially means bringing yourself back into the moment, which means that if I'm being mindful right now, I'm actually sitting here going, I'm aware of how my body feels. I'm aware of, like, the way my hands are feeling, the way my feet are feeling. I know that I'm here right now, and I'm aware that I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm saying what I'm saying, and what I'm not saying. Am I being clear here? So it's very much about, mindfulness is just about being in the moment. And there are a lot of courses and strategies that can, teach us mindful meditations and so on. But simply, if we want to practice this, there's a very simple way of doing it. Just close your eyes, okay? You can try this now if you like. Just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and just release. Take a deep breath and release. And just allow yourself to sense your body. Okay, so just take a moment to notice your feet, how they feel. Notice the fabric. Notice the fabric you're wearing. Notice how your hands feel. Notice how your breathing is, and just breathe deep and release. And as you do this, you find that you start coming into the present moment and start slowing down. This is one of the most effective strategies to actually break the stress cycle and come back to peace and calm. And the more we practice it, the more the body starts to recognize that this is what we need. And essentially, you can do it pretty much anywhere, right? You don't really need anything special in order to make that happen. I was going to show a video on this, but I think because of time, we're just going to move forward if that's all right, right? And once you're calm, once things start to kind of calm down, then you can really begin to ask yourself a couple of important questions, right? So remind ourselves that, we actually only live in the now. The past is gone, can't do anything about that. The future hasn't happened yet. So I don't really know, essentially, what's going to happen. I can predict certain things, I can plan certain things, but essentially there's a level of trust. I don't know what's going to happen. And so I remind myself, once I've become mindful, is that I am here and I can only influence the now. So the question to ask yourself here, when you're being mindful, is what is the opportunity for me right now? What can I do right now? How can I improve my situation in this moment? And that is where we can make change happen. Yeah? So let's go to the second one. The second way that we do stress is that we try to remember everything. We try to be super people, right? So many of us try to remember everything without writing anything down. Anyone guilty of that? So we try to have all these mental lists, right? I have to do this in a day, but, and then what happens? You eventually forget something, right? Then at the end of the day, you remember, oh God, I forgot this, that, and the other, and it was important. What happens? Stress, right? And then you go into damage control and all of that situation, right? Can anyone relate to this? Yeah? So why is that? I mean, if we try to remember everything, our brains are pretty capable things, right? But actually, physiologically, the conscious mind can only remember 4 to 5 chunks of information. Okay? And this is not just one person, this is average. This is for the human being. So consciously, we can only remember plus or minus about 4 chunks of information. But if I'm stuffing like 10 things, I'm trying to remember them in my conscious mind, it's not going to be possible. Something has to be, the excess has to be filed away. And then of course I'm not going to remember it, right? Then will come the stress. So what do we actually need to do? The strategy here is to start creating some mental space for ourselves, right? The way to be calm and to get things done is to have some space to be able to breathe and do things, right? So it's quite simple, but sometimes you might forget to do it because it takes a bit of time, but just simply write things down. Anytime something comes to you, have a piece of paper, have a little notepad, whatever, write it on your phone. I mean, nowadays we have access to, all kinds of things. Just write it down then and there, get it out of your conscious awareness, and then you can deal with it later. It just gives you the ability to be able to process things as you need to, as they come along, right? And then what happens is once you have things written down, they serve as physical reminders, so you can actually sit there and go, okay, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And it's a really gratifying feeling, when you cut stuff out of, I know, I love that. I actually really love that. And it also allows us to prioritize what's urgent and what's not. And actually there's going to be another tip linked to this, which I'll come to in a moment, right? And if we're feeling too many negative, overwhelming emotions, one of the best things to do is to just really take 5 minutes out, whether it's at work or in a certain situation, just take 5 minutes out and vent on paper. You know, sometimes we don't realize that the mind-body connection is that when you're feeling things and you're not bottling it up, you're not saying it, it actually keeps circulating the stress. So just take 5 minutes, take a break, just write stuff out and then tear it up. It is the most effective way of just clearing the mental space. You can refocus and get back to what you need to do. Yeah? Now, another way that we actually reduce stress is that we focus on all that we can't control. Okay? What do I mean by this? Imagine if this is a scenario that I came up with. It's a bit general, but see if you can relate to this. Imagine that you're planning a holiday, okay, to Thailand or some other really amazing destination, okay? Imagine you're planning a holiday and that you've been saving up and it's a family holiday and you really want to go or whatever. And you booked your tickets for the family and things like that. And then suddenly you realize, oh, there was a tsunami there a few years ago, okay? And you have this thought, is it safe? Can I go? Okay? And you have this thought, I mean, this might sound really out of the ordinary, but this does sort of happen, right? And you go, oh my God, there was a tsunami there, can I go? And then you start to have these panic scenarios in your mind, right? So what are you actually doing? You're actually focusing on something that you can't control. Or another scenario, let's look at this. Imagine that you're planning an important event at work or it's a family gathering or whatever. And you've delegated things to people. So you've given jobs away and you've told this one and that one to do things like that. And you've delegated it, but you keep feeling the need to follow up. And you keep feeling the need to follow up with them and bother them and phone them and have you done it, have you done it, have you done it. Because essentially you're not sure whether they're going to do it or not, right? So what happens, you just get so flustered that you decide, okay, I'm going to just take over and do it myself. Anyone relate to that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So what are you essentially doing there? What are you essentially doing there?
Being a martyr.
Okay, being a martyr, yeah. But essentially you're taking over, right? You're focusing on things that are essentially not in your control. It's in somebody else's control to do that. But, I mean, it's not in our control whether something else is going to happen or, God forbid, another natural disaster may strike. We don't know, things like that, right? So what we tend to do is, one of the biggest things that causes us stress on a day-to-day basis is when we shift our focus to what we don't control. And we actually don't even realize it, right? So things like, for example, what will other people think? When I'm focusing on what will somebody else think, essentially, do I ever control what another person thinks?
Never.
No, right? But what am I doing? I'm wasting all of my energy and I'm stressing about something I can do nothing about. But this is very common. It's a human thing. We do this, right? The idea is to just kind of train ourselves to figure out how we individually do stress. So, think about these ideas and think, okay, which one applies to you, and focus on the strategy there. So that is the way to get some value out of what we're talking about today, right? So how do you actually change this? This is a very common problem. I mean, it can cause a lot of stress. So how do we actually change it? First of all, stop and take it. Every time you find yourself stressing about some other thing that you can't really control, take a moment, just stop. First of all, the best thing to do is change position. So if you're sitting down, stand up. If you're standing up, sit down. Just move from the place that you are. Sometimes we don't realize it, but it breaks the physiological kind of connection, and that helps us to break out of the stress, right? So just take a moment, stop, take a breath, and then ask yourself, what is in my control in this situation? Okay? What do I actually control? And I would recommend on a piece of paper, make 2 columns. And make one column that says in my control and the other column out of my control. And in my book, I've talked, there's a whole exercise that trains you how to do this. But it's like really focus on that and say, what's in my control in this situation? And then literally write it down. And you realize that there's more than we actually initially think. Our thoughts, the way we behave, the way we respond, that is in our control, right? So when we actually write it down, we start to notice, and it helps to shift our focus. And sometimes you also have to write down what's not in my control. So you write that down too. And once you've done that, you can actually go and say, is there anything I can do to influence this? Can I change this in any way? And if not, then I have to practice a strategy to let it go. Yeah? So, everyone with me so far? Yeah, I'm not going too fast, am I? So, another strategy, another way that we do stress, okay, this is an interesting one, is that we create overwhelm for ourselves. Okay? Now, how do we create overwhelm? This is the one I was talking about. I said I'm going to connect this to the earlier one. Is, when we think about all the things that we have to do, like if I think about all the things I have to remember and do in a particular day, what happens is if I think, okay, I have to do, for example, silly, but if I have to do groceries, I have to go and make this phone call, I have to do a presentation for work, I have to, do X, Y, and Z. The way that I'm thinking about it as a list, but my mind has to go, I have to imagine doing all of those things at the same time, because it's not been given any timeline, right? So my mind is going, oh my God, I've got to do all of this, I've got to do it all now, right? What happens? Stress. I go straight into overwhelm, because there's been no timeline, nothing's been structured, it's just my mind is visualizing all of this stuff all at the same time, right? And so what's going to happen? Naturally, I'm going to be stressed. And then, of course, what happens? Can you function then? No. And this is what brings procrastination, because you're so tired by thinking about it all. You don't want to do anything. Right? And then you resist, and you resist, and you resist. And the cycle continues, right? So you get stuck in this vicious cycle. So what we tend to do without realizing is, we tend to create overwhelm, right? So what's the strategy to beat this? Plan your work. Right? So when you've actually written things down that you need to do, the most important thing is not just to do a list, but to actually do a SMART plan, a SMART way of action. So we've heard of SMART goals, yes? Yeah, most people have heard of it. It's a very common acronym. Basically, it's about looking at, okay, how do I need to do X, Y, and Z specifically? So what specifically do I need to do? And then putting a timeline for it. So when do I actually need to do it by? And then scheduling it in. But the most important thing in all of this is to make sure that we set goals realistically. Yeah? So we actually start to look at, am I giving myself a realistic time frame to get this done? And if not, what adjustments do I need to make? That is one of the best ways to actually crack the overwhelm and come back to a state of calm, right? And some of the tips I like to give on this are a little bit practical. So make sure that you're planning visually. So nowadays we tend to use a lot of digital diaries and things. And I personally don't really recommend those because you can't really see physical space. So I say, either use like something like paper-wise where you can see your week, or use a paper diary, because what actually happens there is that you can see spaces in your schedule, and that really helps you to calm you down. Like if you're looking at something on a PDA or a phone or whatever, everything is very compressed. Your whole schedule looks very compressed, and then your mind is thinking, oh my God, I have to do everything all at the same time. So you don't see space, you can't relax. Visual space helps us relax, right? Imagine going out in a garden or sitting in the green. What happens? You start to automatically relax because you see space. We just naturally respond to that, right? And when we see clutter, what happens? Tend to get stressed. So that's one of the things to think about visually, right? So use visual planning and break tasks down so that you can actually prioritize and see space at the same time. So you can learn to relax, right? Another way that we actually do stress is that we create clutter. Okay? Now, we're all busy people. I mean, I'm sure we all have lots to do, and this is the way that modern life is. But another way that we actually end up creating stress is that we have a cluttered work environment or a cluttered home environment. We don't mean it to be that way, but a cluttered environment creates cluttered brain. I always say this, Clutter space, clutter brain. There's just no other way, because if you're not seeing space outside, how can your mind organize it? Because if I'm seeing this here, I automatically think I have to do something. If I see this here, I automatically think I have to respond to this, right? Because every time I'm seeing something, it's a stimulus, and I have to respond to it. I either have to tidy it up, work on it, or whatever, right? So the more clutter I have, the more stress I'm going to have. That's just the simple way. So one of the most important things we can do is start creating a clear space for ourselves, right? So which means that, try to focus on the tasks at hand. So keep what you need in front of you and try to keep away what you don't need, whether you're at your work desk or whatever. Just keep your focus on what's present. So you can get that done and then tell yourself, I'm going to work on one thing at a time. And if something else comes up, because urgent things do come up, that's just a fact of life, right? You have to kind of remind yourself, okay, I have to deal with this now, but I'll come back to what I've got. But just try creating a clear space, even whatever space it is, whether it's you start from your bedroom or your office or whatever. That little clarity will get a lot more productivity happening. Yeah? So now the sixth way, I mean, I'm just giving you generic ways in which we do stress so that you can think, okay, which ways do I do stress, okay, for yourself? And then apply those. You know, everything will not be relevant to everyone, but these are just some general tips, you know. So think about which ways do I do stress and work on those, if that's helpful, yeah. So one other way that we do stress is that we actually get burnt out, right? We get burnt out. Why? Because of course, the mental stress is going on and on and on, and we're not doing anything about that. And we're actually not allowing ourselves rest. Okay? And we are actually, a lot of the time, running on empty. So you need to think about it. Am I actually running on empty? And this is the thing that will cause procrastination and further stress. Because there's that sense of overwhelm, too much going on. Then you get burnt out, and remember, it's all physical. So you saw the lady talking about all the hormones. When those hormones are surging in our body, they're actually giving us all of these physiological symptoms, right? That will make us tired as well, right? So the strategy, the way to really deal with this, one is of course mindfulness. So I'm trying to connect them together as well, is take proper breaks. Now, I can think of one client who was, I'd like to share her story a little bit because it's a really good example. She was studying to do her PGCE, which is a very demanding teaching course, and she was actually finding herself getting very stressed out. And every time I would ask her, are you taking breaks? She's like, yeah. So I said, how are you taking breaks? She said, well, I kind of sit at my desk and I check Facebook or I check emails or whatever. I'm thinking, okay, so you're sitting in the same room. She's like, yeah. So I said, what else do you do? She said, well, I might walk out and I might go into the kitchen to get a drink or something. I said, well, then when you come back, how does that feel? She's like, well, not very good. So, and through that process, what she realized was that she's taking breaks, but they're not real breaks, right? Because it's very interesting, but our bodies have anchors. Like we get anchored to a certain place. So if I have a desk, my desk is my unconscious anchor for work. So even if I'm sitting there thinking I'm relaxing, my body is still in work mode. It hasn't broken that physiology yet, right? So if I really want to take a break, I need to get up, move out of there and do something completely different. Even if it's for a very short amount of time, that break will be a real break, right? So you need to think about, okay, am I actually giving myself real breaks? And am I doing something significantly different in order to be able to release the stress and be in a completely different state of mind and body? Once you do that, then you come back and you'll find that you'll be much more rejuvenated. It doesn't mean that you have to go out and take long walks or anything, but even shutting the door, leaving the room, talking to a friend, doing something completely different that you wouldn't normally do. So that's one thing to give a try. Yeah. Now, we're kind of getting there. So another way that we actually do stress is, again, connecting to all the others, is that we keep the chemicals flowing, right? So the stress has been continuing, the chemicals continue to flow in the body, we run on burnout. Now, a lot of us have a lot to do, so what we tend to do is we tend to forego exercise and recreation, right? So one of the things we actually do is we keep our bodies on red alert this way, because the stress is going on and the chemicals are going on, so the body is on red alert. Yeah, and it's going to stay that way unless we do something to break that cycle. Because once these hormones are activated in the body, they don't just go away. They're not just going to die out. What's going to happen is the cortisol and all of that is going to continue flowing unless I break that cycle. So one of the most important strategies is to exercise. Yeah? And we don't actually realize it, but it's the thing, because it actually gets all these, because once these chemicals have been activated, they are producing energy in the body, which then has to be released so they can come back to a state of natural natural beings. So then what we have to do is exercise regularly. And 20 or 30 minutes, even twice or 3 times a week can make an enormous difference. And if you are feeling that moment of real anxiety or stress, just go out and do a little bit of exercise, jump on a trampoline at home or do some yoga, sit down, breathe, whatever you can manage, just to break that physiological pattern. Because what we don't realize is that stress might be in our minds, but it's just as much in our bodies, in fact, and that's where it stays, so we need to do something to break the cycle. And the last tip was, this is just a tip, is to use actual essential oils. Essential oils are amazing because the brain wonderfully responds to smells in a very unique way. Our sense of smell is connected to the limbic system, which is again a part of the brain and the endocrine system. And this is basically, this is where our emotions and our memories are stored. So why this is why they say that you should apply attar before praying. Because it actually connects it connects you to memories and senses. So when you're actually using smells to relax, it also takes you to a different place. So find, smells that you enjoy. Like, you can use lavender or chamomile or anything that sort of, puts you in a relaxed state. And it's amazing how effective it is. And you can, put it on a tissue, take it with you, or, burn candles, but I know the gentleman here probably won't do that. So, you never know though. But these sort of things actually really work, and they're almost instant, So if you want that little bit of, reprieve from stress and you're not figuring out how to do it, these few strategies can just get you out of that state, and then you can figure out what to do with the situation that you're dealing with. So I really hope that, some of these ways of doing stress have been clear, and I've been able to explain them in a way that you can kind of use the ones that are relevant to you. And do try the tips and see which ones actually work for you. And if you feel that you need to make an adjustment, go ahead and make adjustments, be creative, try something new, because that's when you'll figure out what's working for you and what isn't working. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. That was very thought-provoking. I think one of the tips that I'm going to definitely take away is the smell. I didn't know that there was much of a connection. I know smell can make you feel better, but the connection... Exactly. But, one of the questions that I had before we go out to the floor is, when you speak about trigger thoughts, do we have the ability to control trigger thoughts, or do we have the ability to contain them or manage them in a particular way?
That's a very, very interesting and important question, because actually, like I said, we are thinking thousands of thoughts in any given day, any given moment, right? So you're having about 25 to 50,000 thoughts of thought about a day. So it's that big a variation. So nobody can really count it, and it hasn't really been counted yet, although they're doing a lot of work on neuroscience. But coming back to managing trigger thoughts, no. It can be very difficult to know which thought triggered where. But you know yourself as a person, and the thing to remember is that when you begin a journey of self-awareness, that's where you can kind of figure out, okay, what are sort of the things that bother me? What are the things that break with my values? What are the things that upset me? What are the things that I find unacceptable? When you kind of grow as a person and you become more self-aware, you tend to at least have a general idea of the things that will upset you or stress you out, right? We all tend to know that. And as we grow older, we begin to realize that. And so when we start to work on ourselves that way and we grow, then generally we tend to manage stress a little bit better in any case. But to actually catch each and every trigger thought, it's going to be difficult. And this is why I wanted to give strategies that were practical, so that even if you find yourself, running away with, thinking about this, that, and the other, or worrying about the future, you can say, no, I can just come back to the present moment. And that's doable. That's doable. So then what you do is you manage what's happened, and you bring yourself back.
Okay, let's go to the floor. Can I get some questions, please? So we'll take 3 at a time, and then we'll answer in that way. Is that okay for you?
Okay, if I can
remember them. I'll remember them. If we don't, we'll ask them again. Yes?
It's very likely I do get stressed. When I do get stressed, I just go into the imagination. I know these things will not happen, and it really helps me. So I don't know whether it works or not. But do you think
Sorry, say that again?
Go into the imagination,
Yeah.
like, you know, into a different world, and I get relaxed myself, you know. So I don't know whether it works or not. But
I'm sure actually...
You can answer it straight away.
Yeah,
I think it might be
I think it
best.
does work. The key is, like I said, that when you're actually playing the what if game, it's the same thing. What people are doing is they're going into their imagination, but they're visualizing what could go wrong, right? So if they're thinking, okay, what if, for example, what if I came here and nobody liked my dog, for example, right? So I'm actually going to my imagination as well, but I'm imagining a negative result, right? So if you could actually break that cycle and visualize a positive result, visualize what you want, and I talk a lot about visualizing in coaching and even in the book as well. But that is really, really important. So if you're doing that and you're visualizing, that's excellent. And what I would even recommend is if you are getting stressed, then visualize what you want to have happen in the area that you're getting stressed in. So if you're working on something around a relationship or work or whatever, use your imagination to think about how would you really like it to be, and that gets your mind connected with, oh, this is the future I'm looking forward to, and that will change the whole thing.
well, my first question is the idea of visualization. Because we use sportsmen and also business professionals to imagine an outcome which they want to achieve. So beginning the end, and then you work to make it.
Beginning the end in mind.
How does that come out to the state of anywhere? Which is you involving yourself with the visual in the what you want to have. Because progressively, people want the outcome. And you have to be checking yourself how you can do that.
That's quite an interesting one, because visualization has to also be coupled with action, right? So a lot of times what will happen is that we have this, like this is why I was talking about smart goal setting, is because you need to visualize, but the first thing you need to also do is think about, okay, what is the end result that I want, and then what are the steps that I'm actually physically willing to take, right? And then you look at the realistic side of things, and then you look at, okay, also another important thing is contingency planning, right? So what could potentially go wrong? It's not that you're imagining it, but you're kind of planning for it. And one of the things that can also stress people out is getting really attached to the result. Okay, now this is again a human thing. And I do talk about that in the book, but it's difficult to kind of go into that as a general, because some people tend to get more attached, some people tend to get less attached, right? But it's something that you can kind of work on for yourself and go, okay, if I'm getting really attached, what is again out of my control? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to surrender? And what can I focus on? And when you do that, when you're actually taking action, and then you're visualizing yourself taking action as well, it comes together. And that's when you tell it to the goal. I didn't hear. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Reduce stress are all very interesting. My question was, are there any scientific papers or scientific studies that have been done to prove that those tips actually work? The reason why I'm asking this question is that the tip that you mentioned about preparing to-do lists and then getting them done, etc. It's very similar to a method called getting things done. And then I've read scientific paper, that proves that this method works. So it's just strengthens the belief into like the efficiency of the method. So that's why I'm asking, are there any scientific studies that prove that other tips work as well?
I'm sure there are actually. I can't tell you generally because some of these tips are from my own experience, and some of them are things that I've read. But there is a lot of research being done now on neuroscience and coaching as well, and looking at how the mind responds, to some of these things, to visualization and to planning and to looking at also. There are also other things that look at how people respond to status and uncertainty, and there's a lot of work going on now. So if you were actually to look, you will find evidence, and there are a lot of coaching studies happening now as well.
Yeah, I don't think some of these tips would work in severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia, would they?
I actually can't comment on that because I'm not a medical doctor. I think when it comes to that, that's a medical illness. So medical illness, first of all, requires, because those are chemical imbalances.
Now, have you studied that though? Do you know if it actually works? Because from what I've read, they don't actually work.
Well, that's not my area. I haven't studied that, so I can't really comment on that. Yeah. Okay, just go to the back, please.
Sorry, just related to that question. I mean, when a Muslim here, so is there like Muslim examples where, I suppose it's psychiatry or that sort of thing, where it's mental health issues as well. But for example, in Muslim religion, there's jinn. And if you tell that to a psychiatrist, if they don't understand Muslim religion, people wouldn't understand what jinn is. And they say, well, you're schizophrenic. But the thing is, though, within the Muslim religion, for example, we can say there's another dimension of jinn, and we accept it, and it's part of our religion. But the thing is, though, that I've heard that there is a Muslim psychiatric team in London, which are developing that area of research. And I've heard about it, but the thing is, though, I think there are Muslim answers for what we're doing here as well, what you're doing as well. But my main question is, what's the title of your book?
It's called.
Great. Looking forward to you to answer that.
I was like, I wasn't sure what your question.
I don't know. Did everyone hear that at the back? Did everyone get that at the back?
How much
Okay.
How much is it?
So the gentleman was asking around, are there any Muslim tips to dealing with a lot of these pressures and stress? And one of the issues that he brought to light was the concept of jinn in the Muslim belief and how people are dealing with that. And the gentleman basically described that we could possibly as Muslims say it's a jinn, but in a Western context it would be said, defined in terms of a psychological ailment. But that wasn't the question, that was more of a comment and discussion. But the name of the book is Discover the Best in You, Life Coaching for Muslims, so you'll be able to have a look at that here.
How much is it?
£8. It varies, but it's around 8 or lower. And it's available on Amazon or online.
You're not selling them here today?
No, actually
they usually do.
Maybe, yeah, go online.
Yeah,
Be
you should have
online.
brought
You've
some
got
to
some
sell.
good book shops as well. Okay, do we have any more questions?
You can buy them from me actually.
Yes, go for it.
Being in the moment strategy is one of the successful ones. Can you give us more, examples or, some ways to be in the moment, like here and now?
So more examples of in the moment
more exercises,
and
like
tips
ways
for that.
of being,
That's a really good one, but that's a good question. But essentially what I would say is just focusing on the body. That is the best way. Because most of us live life from here up. Without actually realizing it, we actually live life from here up. We forget that there's the rest of this, right? So, our bodies are working, of course, but we're not actually connecting to, like for example, I'm picking this up, and I'm not really thinking that I'm picking it up. I'm just doing it. How many people eat a whole meal without realizing that they've eaten? There, yeah. Right. So that's telling you something, right? So a lot of us will eat, but we eat kind of mindlessly. We're either at the desk or at the computer, in front of the television, before you know it, you've eaten a whole plate of food, but you haven't connected to having eaten it. And then you kind of wonder, like, did I eat? Or, we're still left with that lack of fullness because we're actually not paying attention to the mind-body connection. We're not in the moment. We're in our head somewhere else. So I'm sitting here I'm supposedly enjoying the meal, but my brain is doing all of this, that, and the other, right? So it's things like that, So it's just thinking about, okay, I'm eating. Let me just enjoy simple things, like I'm enjoying my food, let me eat, Like try to put the television off, simple things like that, Sit down with a cup of tea in the morning, whatever, and just enjoy it and say, this is my cup of tea. It just really gets you present, like to now, and it's like you will find those one or two things that you enjoy in your life. Everybody has something different. Maybe for them it's a cup of tea, for somebody else it's a stroll, for somebody else it's, 5 minutes out, whatever it is. But it's finding those one or two things that just help you to disconnect from the head and come back into the mind, the body as well. So you're connecting with all of you. Yeah, is that helpful?
Yeah.
Any more questions? I did see some hands up. Yes, please.
You mentioned about how experiences affect the way you react to something. How does that relate to perhaps young people or anyone watching TV, films? Does that affect your stress levels?
films.
Yes.
Violent films.
Violent films, stressful images, you know, Xbox,
pornography for children,
you
watching
know,
pornography on mobile
yeah, I
phones.
mean all these kinds of things. See, they will affect your physiology, because again you're having, without realizing it, you might think it doesn't affect you, but it's a physical stimulus, right? The body is stimulus response, stimulus response, stimulus response. That's how the autonomic system works. You can't just shut it off, right? So if you're having this kind of stimuli, there is going to be a response, whether you're connecting to it or not. So for example, you know, sometimes you watch a violent movie and you'll be left like not feeling quite yourself. Can anyone relate to that?
Yeah.
And you're not quite sure why you're not yourself, but that's going on. It's the film, you know. And sometimes, you know, nice movies will leave you in this, you know, thing. You know, I think as women we can relate to that, you know. So there's the you know.
Bollywood.
Yeah, Bollywood, of course. So, let's be honest, right? So, yeah. Can't believe I said that. But it's true, right? So what we watch and what we listen to, what we see will affect us. So this is why it's so important to start being conscious for yourself. It doesn't mean you cut everything out. It just means that you say, okay, this type of stuff I don't enjoy. Like, I don't like to go to see movies that are just senseless violence, you know, because I just feel upset. Why would I do that to myself, right? It's like that.
Okay, we're going to go for the last question. I don't know whether someone had their hands up. Yeah.
Have you got any advice on how prayer might be able to affect stress or mood?
Yeah.
So how prayer would affect stress or mood?
Yeah, of course. It's the best mind-body connection there is.
It's the best.
It's the best mind-body connection there is, right?
What if you're kind of too tense at the moment? It's not prayer time, or you know how?
First things first, I would suggest that if you if you're going to actually use prayer, I mean, you can first of all pray anytime, even if it's, you know, if it's not prayer time, do wudu and do a 2 rakat mustahab salah, whatever. You know, first of all you can do that. And before prayer, one of the things to do is to just sit down and breathe. You know what I was talking about mindfulness? You know, just a few moments of mindfulness, and of course applying some itar or something can really open up, you know, your senses. So use that and then just breathe for 5 minutes, get yourself in that state of prayer, and you'll find that it will relax you. And once you finish, you will be in a different state. Because first of all, you've done the relaxation and then you've moved your body as well, right? So automatically, you are changing your physiology, automatically. That's the beauty of Salah, it's just there, it's built in. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I thought you might have you got something in the book with that as well, in terms of just the effect and how to actually approach?
Well, I've done some lectures. I've done some lectures on Salah. If you're interested, I can email it to you. Just let me know.
Go to the mosque.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for the questions as well. 2 announcements I want to just quickly make is one, that there will be a future, possibly a future talk on Sayeda's book. So please do come for that and just be aware of that through the notice board emails. And secondly, there is a lovely, pretty city circle box at the back that requires pennies or notes or pounds. The management team here are requesting that if anyone can donate some money just towards venue hire and speakers and so forth, that would be great. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Before I do finish up, I just wanted to ask, you do have a website, right?
Yes.
So could you just tell us what that is?
The website is makelifehappen.com, and there is information on the book there as well. There's also another website which is dedicated to the book, which is called lifecoachingformuslims.net. So those are 2 different ones. And you will find the book on Amazon and stores and things.
If anyone needs to get a chance to get the questions answered, please feel free to approach Sayeda. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.